witches are actually not people, not sorcerers, but rather fake coins, okay? And understanding that really provides you the keys to see the role of the church much clearer, okay? Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In my previous video, I've promised to you to make a video about witches. Spooky. And again, this is the video, okay? So it follows, once again, the ideas of a brilliant Russian thinker, Igor Shkurin, who, again, unfortunately is not with us. So yes, this video is specifically based on his article from 2011. That would be 14 years ago at the time of this recording specifically. I'm gonna link the article in the description. It's in Russian, but once again, you can translate it with the help of machine translators as much as you want. And there's also a few videos, but they are linked in the article itself, which you can watch if you wish. So the question we are asking is, who are the witches? Even more so, we may ask, what are the witches? We're hinting at something here. So, long story short, actually, without further ado, let me just put it this way. What we call witches, you know, the ones that the Inquisition was so vigorously hunting, are simply, drumroll, fake coins, okay? So the people who were involved in forgery, of course, they are also involved in the so-called witch trials. They were all obviously sometimes tortured, actually, at the very least interrogated, and sometimes put before court, sometimes, how do you say it, sentenced to some very bad stuff because they were accused of heresy, right? Because again, forgery was the type of heresy, I guess, in some respect, because the church was the institute. We'll actually talk about this at the very end, managing the validity, so-called, so to speak, rather, of the money supply, okay? So, yeah. So the church needed to ensure that the violation, i.e. the forgery, again, would stop. So obviously people, actual people, were tortured and interrogated, right? But what we usually call witches are not people, but coins, alright? So, yeah. What people usually understand by witch tests employed during witch trials were actually directed at the coins themselves. And that's why they are so weird. I mean, we'll look at specifically 5 examples, and you will understand that if you apply this to people, it makes absolutely no sense. But if you think that the witch is a coin, then it makes perfect sense, or at least some sense, okay? A lot of sense, actually. So, yeah. It's not that the people of the past were stupid. It's actually more that the people of the present are stupid in thinking that the people of the past were stupid. And we're just we're not used to understanding this, esoteric nature of knowledge of the previous eras. By the way, watch my video, how did I call it? Knowledge is arcane, something like that. One of the recent ones. I don't remember the exact title, to be honest. Anyway. Yeah, it was an allegory, right? When you see drawings like woodcuts of women being dealt with not very pleasantly, let's put it this way, these are mostly coins, actually. Most of the time. Not always, by the way. Sometimes people got carried away and took it too literal, but that's another story. Alright? So let's talk about the terms exactly, for a little bit. You know that there is this famous book, The Mallet of Witches, or The Hammer of Witches, Malleus Maleficarum, from 1486, even though I would say that the dating is doubtful, because again, look at all the issues with authorship, like the book is probably actually written later and definitely printed later than 1486. But anyway, it's a cool book, right? Malleus Maleficarum, slaughtered and tortured. Sorry, I could not do it, the song is too great, okay? Anyway, so the term is maleficarum, but that's plural and in some case, right? Actually, it's malefica, or, if you wish, maleficent. It's probably a more familiar word. What does it mean? It means bad deeds, right? Mal is bad, and facere is to do, right? So, bad doing, the wrongdoer, so to speak, right? how do you call it? The loss in financial sense, right? So yeah. Whereas the word that we usually use to translate it, for example, in English, that would be witch, right? Comes from the word wisdom. So that would be a wise person, right? Kind of like a female shaman, you might say, right? Or sometimes men were actually also called witches. So that would be just shaman, you know, typically understood as a male, but it doesn't really matter, right? So, but it's a completely different word, right? Evil doer and a wise person, that's like almost exactly the opposite, right? Yeah, so what, in reality, at least according to Shkurin, and I actually agree with him a lot, at the very least a lot, maybe not 100%, but 95 for sure. So, Malleus Maleficarum, this book, and other similar books, by the way, which were plenty actually, is just an instruction for churches' secret services, where, once again, who is an inquisitor? It's basically an intelligence agent, right? It's an interrogator / investigator, like the very word inquisition means inquiry, right? It's the one who makes the inquiry. So they were gathering all the evidence and then put it in front of the court, and then the court decides, what do we do with this person? Because, maybe you didn't know that, but the inquisitors themselves, they didn't do anything. In the sense of, you know, how do you call it? Executing the sentences, right? They did not, in fact, they didn't even sentence anyone. They just gathered the evidence and presented it, okay? Of course, they did use some maleficent, pun intended, practices, right? In gathering this evidence, specifically if we're talking about how they dealt with the forgers themselves. Definitely, we've had torture, we've had all the bad stuff there, which we do not approve of. At the very least, I myself do not. Anyway, the end goal of all of this procedure, of all of this witch hunt, was to get rid of forged / altered / fake / counterfeit coins. I'm gonna be using mostly the word fake just because it's short and it's easy to pronounce, you know. But all of this applies, okay? Wrong, you know, fake, maleficent, right? Malefica. So let's take a look at 5 different tests specifically. And let's ask ourselves constantly, subconsciously, this question: are these tests about people or coins? Are they from the repertoire of some typical, you know, slasher movie villain, or they are actually applicable to coins? Okay, let's take they come from an assayer's textbook, right? A jeweler's textbook or something. So the first test we're going to consider, again, that Shkurin considers in his article, once again, pretty much 90% of what I'm saying I just took from his article and his videos, alright? So I add very little, but I add a little bit here and there, alright? So first test we're gonna consider is the so-called hot iron test, okay? Maybe you've heard some other names for it. Anyway, the idea is that, again, according to the book, which is a metaphor, we remember that, you give a person, wink wink, to hold or to walk on red hot iron, okay, for a few minutes, maybe like 2 or 3, okay? And if they're okay, they're a good person, okay? So what's the reasoning? I mean, they're innocent, basically. So what's the reasoning? According to, again, experts who claim that witches are people and not coins, the idea was that the god would protect an innocent person, right? So if you give an innocent person a red hot piece of iron, the god would make sure they're okay. But seriously? I mean, returning to my comment how we are stupid for thinking that the people in the past were so stupid. I mean, that's not really the past even. It's 500 years ago, right? It's very recent, comparatively speaking. Like, by the same token, I can just walk around in the streets and stab random people with a knife, right? And I could say, well, if they are innocent, the god would protect them, right? And if I manage to undo them, so to speak, well, then they are a witch. Then I did a good thing, right? Which makes absolutely no sense, right? Imagine trying to do that, actually. Please don't try to do that, by the way, just in case you don't understand the sarcasm here. So, yeah. Probably coins then, right? Let's think about this side of the coin, pun intended. So the red hot iron would be something like 850 / more like dash 900 Celsius, okay? 900 degrees Celsius, maybe a bit lower. But anyway, you can actually find multiple charts of like iron temperature versus color or something like that. You can see that it's 800-900 Celsius, something like that. So the thing is that the pure silver melts at 962 Celsius. So that would be a bit higher than the red hot iron, okay? But the alloys of silver with other metals generally melt at lower temperatures. In fact, as low as 778 Celsius, right? So almost 200 degrees lower than the pure silver. Thus, the idea is that you put, I don't know, this coin in contact with iron by some means, okay? Red hot iron specifically, so the temperature should be at least approximately in the ballpark. So the true silver coin would not melt, okay? While the fake one will. The one that has too much, you know, how do you call it? Not the defects. Too much stuff added, let's put it this way, right? Then the second test we shall consider is the so-called needles test, alright? And it's actually very easy to understand because even now the assayers and the jewelers use what is literally called the testing needles. I will show you the picture probably to figure out the metal fineness, you know. So before 19th century, there was a lot system in terms of evaluation of the fineness of metal, okay? We'll actually return to that later. Let me just describe the test for you. So the most simple iteration of the needles test would be just to scratch the coin with the needle of the appropriate fineness, okay? That's why you have multiple of them. So you assume the coin has certain fineness and you choose the appropriate needle. So if the needle makes a scratch, it means that the fineness of the coin is better than that of the needle, because silver and gold are very soft metals, right? They're very easy to scratch, actually. Like, you know, this famous test of like you chew it. But, I mean, we're professionals, we're inquisitors, so we're using needles, specific ones, like calibrated ones. So, if we scratch it and it leaves a mark, then the fineness of the coin is better than that of the needle, right? If it doesn't leave a mark, then that means that the fineness of the coin is worse than that of the needle. So that would be a good way to evaluate the coin. Should be pretty clear, right? And returning to the issue of lots, so there were 16 lots of silver and, well, depending on the time frame, 24 lots of gold. Up until the 19th century, actually, there was actually like the middle of, or even late 19th century, there were 16 lots of silver. So the quality of silver, meaning like how small is the amount of admixtures, was graded as 16, right? So, curious thing that Shkurin notes is that in German, and by the way, Germany was the place of the witch hunts, like the absolute majority of witch hunts were specifically like the Rhine River Basin, the West Germany. Anyway, the word for the witch in German is Hexe, right? So what is Hexe? Like, think about the word hexadecimal. It's 16, right? So is there any connection? I actually don't know, but I think it's not that big of a stretch, you know? If you have 16 needles for the coins, the silver ones, and, by the way, some of the woodcuts, I'm gonna show it to you right now, one of them at the very least. It's pretty small, but if you count, there's 15 on the table, and the guy, the inquisitor, is holding the 16th one, right? So we're dealing with a silver coin here. It's not a woman, or I'm not even sure if it's a woman, like the quality is pretty low. But anyway, it's an interesting take on the etymology of the German word Hexe, right? You know, Hexen, like the witches. So maybe it comes from this hexadecimal lotation of silver, let's put it this way, okay? Of the fineness thereof. Anyway, the third test we shall consider is the tears test, or Tränenprobe in German, right? So the idea is that the witch cannot cry even under torture. And there is generally two ways to do it. So first of all, again, we're dealing with coins. And it's a droplet. It's just a droplet test. Like you can put a droplet of some reactive compound, specifically acids, specifically, for example, nitric acid or whatever other you have at your disposal. And the idea is, since the finer metals, such as silver and gold, are super non-reactive, then the finer the coin is, you know, the less of an impact your droplet would do, right? So you basically evaluate the fineness of the coin depending on the visual characteristics of this place where you put the droplet on, right? So if the other metals react to the acid, you will get like a discoloration, you know, you'll get things like that. So yeah. But however, many of the assayers' books actually say this is a very imprecise method. It's basically too subjective, you know, because there are no precise, you know, tables of like what should happen, you know, in this case. But anyway, the idea is such. And the other method is by using the testing stone. So you can take a special assayer's testing stone, right? You can put lines with your needles, right? And you can take the coin and make a line with it on the stone. I mean, with this, you know, kind of like leave this trace of fine metallic powder on it. And then you put droplets of your acids on each of these lines and the line made by the coin, right? And you just compare the amount, like the color, the amount of like residue or whatever this word, like the precipitate, you know, and thus you determine the fineness of the coin. Like how similar it is to one of your needles, basically. That's another test. Yeah, that's the idea. Of course, there is a method, like a more destructive method that people utilize today, is to precipitate the whole metal, right? You dissolve the whole thing, and then you like, what's the word? Reduce it, right? From your acid. But yeah, quite up, you know, you need a small chemical lab for this. Like the Inquisitor wouldn't do something like this, right? Yeah, so it was probably never used. Anyway, number 4, the test number 4 is weighting, or weighing, I guess is the verb, the witch, right? And there's a famous tourist attraction called Hexen. I don't know, it's in Dutch. In Odewater, again. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correct. Maybe I'll link it in the description so you would know what I'm talking about, which is called the witch's scales. I think you can probably do a simple web search and find what I'm talking about. The witch's scales, okay? So the idea is, of course, today as a tourist attraction, they say, well, the witches were really anomalously light, right? So we weighed them, and if they weighed anomalously light, we say them they are a witch. And today you can go to this little town, you can weigh yourself, and they'll even give you a certificate. Like, if your weight is below a certain point, like you're considered a witch. If it's above, you're fine, okay? But in reality, what are we dealing with? And these are big scales, you know, big weights. So we're talking about tens of kilograms at the very least. So the thing is, well, what if you are dealing with a lot of coins? Like, let's say you have a big bag of coins, like maybe 20 kilograms, maybe 100 kilograms. So how can you evaluate their quality quickly? Well, you put them on these weights, these scales, right? So a coin, if it's, you know, proper, if it's good, it should have a certain weight, because it should have some guaranteed amount of specific metal in it, right? And if it's too light, it means, like, generally, okay, another comment, generally silver and gold are very heavy. I'll give you the table with density on the screen right now. So you can see these are the heaviest metals, the heaviest common ones at the very least, with a small exception of lead, okay? But anyway, it's a very quick and dirty way of evaluation of a big amount of coins, of their quality, right? If they're significantly underweight, then there's too much, you know, additional stuff in them, the stuff that we don't really want to see, such as, again, I don't know, zinc, iron, whatever, you know? So yeah. That's why you weigh. Weigh? Is that a verb? A witch, right? But it's not a witch, it's more like the witches, okay? Plural, because you need many coins, obviously. So yeah, if they are too light, they are obviously witches, right? Maleficarum, that's a different case, the wrong case, but, you know, maleficas, let's put it this in English. Anyway, and the final test, the most showing one actually, that we're gonna be discussing is the water test, also called swimming of the witch, or swimming a witch. So the idea is, let's say I manufactured no. You know how they usually say it? What if my friend manufactured, a fake coin, okay? So he made a counterfeit coin. Anyway, so what if my friend have made a fake coin with exactly the same weight as the real one? Like even in terms of size, it looks similar. So like it's very hard to distinguish by eye. So you put it on weights and it perfectly balances, right? Well, the thing is, again, if it's a real silver or gold coin, it's gonna be very dense because the density of silver and gold is very high, right? However, if let's say significant chunk of this weight is from lower density metals, what does it mean? It means the average density of the coin itself would be lower, right? Which means the volume would be bigger. Okay? So even if we balance it in terms of weight, what if we put it in water? The bigger volume coin would float up with respect to the true coin, right? The true coin would drown. So that's the idea, right? It's called the hydrostatic weighing or underwater weighing, or sometimes it's fancily called hydrodensitometry, right? That's, by the way, one of the methods of determining the body fat percentage, actually, in people, in living people. Again, not paradoxically, ironically, I should say. Okay? So this is how you do it. You put a true good coin that you are sure about on one side of the scales. Is it weights or scales? I don't know. And on the other, you put a test one, right? So if the test one floats, it's made of lower density metals, which means that it's probably fake, at least partially, right? So this is the idea. And think about the general, like the usual explanation from the witch experts, right? What do they say? Well, you drown a woman. If she drowns, she's innocent. Perfect. So we just killed an innocent woman. Like we did a great job, right? And if she floats, it's a witch. It absolutely corresponds to our narrative, but take notice. I'll show you a few woodcuts. Did you notice anything strange? There's always two women here, one of whom is drowned and one of whom is not. So you really need scales with two coins simultaneously. Otherwise, the test makes no sense. But it doesn't even make sense if you put women in there in the first place. You have to be like, what do we mean? Like, do we always drown them in pairs? Like, just think about this for a moment. Like, are these people were so stupid? Probably not, right? But if they are coins, then everything is absolutely reasonable. It's actually perfectly valid, right? So yeah. Of course, again, I'll return to this point. Some people who took it too literal were just drowning women because why not, patriarchy or something. Yeah. Okay, we're pretty much finished with the narrative. I'll just add from my own point of view here. Like, let's try to think about this from the reverse side. Let's imagine we are in the 16th century, so I don't know, 1570s. It's the year 1570 exact, in fact, right? Who is going to make sure that the coins that I'm paying, the coins I'm getting from selling my own stuff are good? Who's gonna do that? There's no one to do that, right? There's only like, if you think about, I don't know, some kingdom of XYZ, the king of XYZ is dirt poor himself. Like, he can barely get like 2,000 people of levy to fight for him, Like, and like, he has no influence, no anything, right? Like, then who's gonna do that? You obviously need a network structure of educated people, right? Working on this stuff, like maintaining the quality of money, right? Something like that. And there's only one such network structure in this time frame. It's called the Catholic Church, specifically through its orders, such as Dominicans and Franciscans, right? I mean, many others, but others were doing other job. But these people were specifically looking at the quality of money. Dominicans specifically, like they were the main inquisitors. because they were the most zealous of all the orders, right? Why are they called Dominicans? It's Dominicanes, right? The dogs of God, the hounds of God, right? So they were the main inquisitors, the police, basically, the FBI/CIA of the Catholic Church period, actually, right? And Franciscans, they were mostly engineers, so they weren't involved in the Inquisition too much, but a little bit, once again. Since they are engineers, so their physics is top-notch, so they could have developed all these methods and utilized them every now and then. Again, inquisitors don't do the dirty work. They just gather the evidence and present it in front of the court. That's all they do, right? Everything else is for the court to decide and the local, I don't know, how do you call it, punishers, to execute, right? Here actually, I have to remember, like, there was, I mean, I kind of missed this thread. I wanted to mention it previously, you know, like alchemy and like general sorcery. So there was a person named Isaac Newton who was managing coins and also doing alchemy, right? Obviously, alchemy was banned on many occasions in many places. Not always, obviously, not everywhere, but sometimes. For exactly this reason, because people thought it's basically forged gold, right? Or silver. And Newton specifically hated forgers. He even sent a few people, like, basically sentenced them to death. It wasn't him who sentenced, it was the court, obviously, but he was the inquisitor on this particular occasion, right? Newton, in case you weren't aware, was the head of the Royal Mint in England, okay? So yeah, he was pretty much into this stuff. Newton was an inquisitor, interestingly, okay? And he was also an alchemist, so he knew the forgery. Interesting. Interesting spin. Anyway, the church, by the way, speaking of the secret services, like managing the quality of money, the church was also the biggest bank in the 17th, we're talking about 16th, okay? The year is 1570. The church was the biggest bank at that time. So, who's managing the money? It's the church. Who else would do it? You know, there's no one, there's literally no one. Like, national states would only appear in like 300 years from now, right? In 1800s, yeah? Anyway, let's go to the conclusions. I think this hypothesis of Shkurin is really brilliant. Once again, as actually many, like I keep reading his notes and I'm really fascinated. Like the guy is really like borderline genius, maybe actually genius. But there are so many good ideas that I took from him that it's actually crazy. Maybe we'll talk about some of them sometime later, after we've dealt with some other stuff. Anyway, the hypothesis of Shkurin is that witches are actually not people, not sorcerers, but rather fake coins, okay? And understanding that really provides you the keys to see the role of the church much clearer, okay? And since we spent like the whole video talking about coins, right? The fake ones or real ones, I really have to remind you, remembering the previous video, that Mongolian nomads have minted coins.
If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.